We are back, MLS Aces Podcast. This is your host, Tom Sweezy. We're sticking with our New Year's resolution. We are getting 2 episodes out a week. And joined with me is a friend from down south. We're going down to Texas. And I don't think I've had the opportunity to speak with anyone from the FC Dallas organization, Garrett. But we do have Garrett Melcer here, digital content manager over at FC Dallas. Thank you for coming on and talking a little Dallas with me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Tom. I'm looking forward to it.
So I guess first and foremost, what does your job consist of on a day-to-day basis? What are you doing inside the organization, outside? Who are you talking with? What does a digital content manager for FC Dallas look like?
It's a lot of different things, and my role has changed a lot over time. I've been with the club 6 years. Started with North Texas SC. Back then it was a USL League One affiliate, now MLS Next Pro. But basically what I do now is just kind of help tell the stories of the club and cover the club, to make it easier for our fans to engage with our players and our staff and everything else. So day to day, a lot of it is doing interviews with players, kind of overseeing some Apple TV content creation, that all the stuff you see on the FC Dallas hub on Apple TV, and then just writing articles and just talking to players and getting their stories out there. And then just a lot of little things in between, but that's kind of the main focus, is getting the stories out there so our fans and the MLS fandom as a whole can understand them and get to know us.
So you've been around the FC Dallas organization for a little bit now, and obviously, if you look at your Twitter bio, it is you interviewing Ricardo Pepi, right?
Yeah.
You have a few different. You mentioned you talk to players and I'm sure coaching staff and everything like that. Doesn't have to be a current player, but is there a player or a few interviews that stand out to you that just maybe were a little bit more special, that felt are at the top of the memory list? I guess I'll go with.
When I look back at my time, I think the Ricardo Pepi, the rise of him was really special. Like I said, I started with North Texas pretty much at the same time he did. He was the club's first ever player. So I worked with him from the time he had just turned 16 and was playing preseason games. And then he scored a hat trick on his pro debut. And then just working with him on and off for 3 or 4 years until he got his big move over to Germany. Seeing that rise from like a kid coming out of the academy. He was not good at interviews at the time. He would kind of answer in like 5 or 6 words at a time, and it wasn't anything we could really use, but we coached him up a little bit. And just to see him go from that to the FC Dallas first team, and then eventually to the national team, and then over to Europe. That's been super special, just be part of that journey. But in terms of the story itself, it's got to be Bernard Kamungo. I'm sure a lot of people have kind of heard a little bit about his story, but basically he was born and raised in a refugee camp in Tanzania, down in Africa. And then he came over to Abilene, Texas with his family when he was like 13 or so, like that, and started doing high school soccer there. And then North Texas SC holds open tryouts every year, and he showed up to one of those back in, I think it was late 2020, ahead of the 2021 season. And it was actually a tryout that I also took part in for a content piece. It was like, here's what it's like to try out for a professional soccer team sort of thing. So we were in the same tryout. Obviously, they picked him to come to preseason, not me.
I was going to say, I'm sure you were there, okay?
Definitely a good decision on the coach's part there. And then, he basically went from strength to strength. He was very raw, obviously, never having had professional coaching, and had only played high school soccer, the highest level. So, he started off slow, but he built season to season, then had a breakout year in 2022 in MLS Next Pro, and then signed with FC Dallas, and then had a breakout 2023 year where he scored against Inter Miami in a game that Messi was playing in. And it's been really, really cool to watch him grow and watch his story and how he's evolved over time as a person. So that's a super special one, just because you don't get a Tanzanian refugee going to an open tryout and then becoming a full FC Dallas player. And he captained the club in preseason. So that's been a really, really cool one to watch.
That doesn't happen every single week.
No, definitely not.
That's funny. No, but look, I think you play a very important role in telling the story of behind the scenes, right? Like, yes, I think a lot of fandom, a lot of soccer is just, what's the result? Did we win a trophy? Like, that's, like, that's, I think, an important part of being a fan or someone following a club. But I think another thing about soccer that maybe makes it a little bit different compared to any other sport in the world is that there's just this level of passion, this level of love for the players on a club and a community and everything like that. And I think your job within the organization plays an important part in that. The other piece to that is I really hope when North Texas won the USL League One that you got a ring that year. I hope so, because
I did.
I love it.
Yeah, actually, it's weirdly enough, it's at this desk that I'm not at very often, but I can. There we go. It's right there.
That's awesome. Does this just say trialist number 17 on it or something like that?
Unfortunately not. That was before I went in the tryout. Yeah, I was only the media coordinator back then, but yeah, big part of the championship run for sure.
The other follow-up that I wanted to ask you on, Diego Pepi, right? He's in the club now. He's a homegrown for the Dallas first team. Any similarities outside of maybe looking alike that you see from a content point of view from Diego to Ricardo?
He definitely has the same high cheekbones as Ricardo. Yeah, that runs in the Pepi family strong. But very different players for sure. He's not 6'2". I think he's probably about 5'9". And he's not the hold-up striker as much. He's kind of like much smaller. Think of like a Diogo Jota from a Liverpool type, where he's always running. He doesn't have like any particular standout. He's just above average, a lot of different things. Got a really good soccer brain on him. And a defender would probably hate playing against him because he's constantly running, kind of nipping at your heels type of player. But as a person, they're very similar. They're like both super respectful guys. They've got a great family, awesome parents. And yeah, he's always happy to do any interviews we need him to do. And, he's always happy to tell me how his brother's doing over in the Netherlands. So yeah, just a really good kid, just like Ricardo is.
I love it. Well, FC Dallas has had one of the more interesting off seasons, and I'll be perfectly honest, this is me saying it, not you. I don't know how I feel about FC Dallas. There's so many questions. There's so many exciting things going on that I don't really know where to start with it. I'm going to start with Eric Quill because he's an interesting story in his own right? He was a player for FC Dallas, came up the coaching tree with FC Dallas, coached North Texas, won a USL League One championship, then obviously bounced around to other organizations, other parts of the country, and now is back, and he's given the full-time managerial role with the first team. I'm assuming you've been around him in the past, and now you're back around him now.
Yeah.
What's it like having Eric Quill back within the organization?
It's awesome because, first of all, Eric's a really good dude, and he's like a player's coach. He's not really worried about what the media or anything is saying. He wants to be on the field with his guys, talking tactics and talking about the fight and the spirit within the team. So an old school type of coach. And yeah, like you said, he came up through the FC Dallas system, played for the Burn, won the title with North Texas, and I worked really, really closely with him during that time. There was basically, I was getting interviews for Pepi and for Eric Quill. That was kind of my job back then. And yeah, so having him back has been really, really cool because when he left North Texas after the 2022 season, I believe, he told our ownership group, I'm leaving now because I want to come back with more experience on my belt to take the first team job, basically. And he did exactly that. He worked under Caleb Porter for the Columbus Crew. And then after that, he went to New Mexico United in the USL Championship and kind of turned that club around in a good way. And so we're hoping that he can come back and work his magic once again because he built a team with North Texas from the ground up, and he's kind of doing the exact same thing with FC Dallas now in 2025 because, yeah, like you kind of hinted at, we've had a pretty insane offseason with all the turnover. So it's for me, it's like I'm getting to learn a lot of new stories and a lot of new faces. And so my work's kind of just beginning, even though it's been an insane offseason already in terms of workload and everything. But it's fun because it's not the same old season again, right? It's everything feels very new and very fresh, and it's awesome to have Eric a part of it again.
With Eric, I obviously I don't know Eric. I'm gonna throw that out there to everyone. But I've heard he's a very intense manager. Like he has no problem calling you out. He has no problem saying what's on his mind. Is that accurate? For sure. Yeah, he requires total and complete buy-in from players and from staff and everybody. He does it in a respectful way, at least with the staff for sure. But with like I said, he's old school in that way with players for sure. He doesn't mind. Shouting and making his emotions felt and everything. The previous two coaches for FC Dallas were much more kind of the newer school where it's much more of like a camaraderie, more of like a friendship mentor type of thing where it's, a little softer and it's a lot more tactics based rather. And not that Eric Quill doesn't use, tactics and everything, but he definitely has that kind of that bite about him that you would associate with some more old school coaches and managers. So it's just interesting to see that firsthand at the first team level because that's totally new for me on that side of it. For sure. And obviously, I'm going to transition this into probably the biggest storyline of the offseason, right? And that's Lucho Acosta
Yeah.
coming to the club. The addition for me, from everything that I've heard about Eric Quill prior to the whole Lucho Acosta saga that happened throughout Major League Soccer, was that, you know, he requires buy-in. He expects the most from every single player and coach on his staff and everything like that. I'm assuming there's a huge amount of buy-in from Lucho Acosta into this. You know, he wanted this move, and he's buying into what Eric Quill and this team and this organization is selling. What have you seen in the early days so far of Lucho Acosta around the club?
So I haven't seen a ton of him on the field, other than the preseason game and 1 or 2 training sessions. The team actually left early to Houston this week because we kind of have like a crazy weather event for Texas. It's in the teens right now with wind chill. It's below 0, I think. So they headed down to Houston to avoid all that. So I haven't been able to actually see him work with Eric too much. But what I can tell you is that when he was signed, I spoke to our chief soccer officer, Andre Zanata. And it was basically, you know, what was your pitch to Lucho to get him here, right? And he said, one, Lucho is incredibly competitive. He wants to win trophies, and we thought that would mesh really well with Eric Quill's type of personality. Eric is hyper competitive, I can tell you that. And so they can mesh on that front where it's win at all costs, and we don't really care how it looks. Let's get 3 points every week. And also, his family is obviously super important to him, and he wants them to be in the right place where they're happy. And he believes that Dallas can be that. You know, we've got direct flights to Argentina from DFW, huge airport here. So where they're from, obviously. And we've had a lot of Argentinian players and coaches here in the past. So maybe a little bit more familiar comforts for them. And so that was a really important aspect of it. But I haven't seen too much of them actually working together yet, just because he arrived less than a week ago. So it's still very early days on that.
What's your personal level of excitement with a former MLS MVP, you know, a trophy winner in the organization now?
Yeah, I just can't wait to see him play on game days, really. We got a taste. We got 30 minutes of it in the preseason last Saturday. Obviously, you know, he's still getting accustomed to how the team plays, and he's definitely not 90 minutes fit or anything. But it's been a little while since we had like a super creative number 10 type. Mauro, I was only here for like the last few days of Mauro Diaz, who's obviously a legend in Dallas. I was an intern at the time. But I remember watching him get a hat trick of assists in one game, and I was like, dude, this guy's left foot is just outrageous. Like, I don't understand how he sees these passes. I'm in the press box, and I don't even see the pass that he's going to find on the field, and he's got 3 guys defending him. So just really excited to see that up close and personal, that because Lucho brings a very similar thing, obviously, and probably brings more goals than Mauro Diaz did. But I think he's also just the type of player that can raise the entire level of the team, especially the attack. And so just really, really looking forward to what he can do, especially with him kind of creating things for Petar Musa playing up top, because I think that duo could probably take the league by storm, because I think they're 2 of the most talented players in the league.
I mean, great transition into what I was going to ask next about Petar Musa. You have him now with Lucho, right? I think you have one of the best 9s with one of the best 10s in the league. You have Bernard Kamungo, who we talked about before, his amazing story, but his experience now within the organization. He's been here and he's been playing a ton of minutes for the organization. You have a brand new guy.
So I think I lost you there.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's good old me hitting the mic there. You have Lucho Acosta. You have Petar Musa. You have some new names, Anderson Julio. Some familiar names, Bernard Kamungo, Sebastian Lletget, even a Logan Farrington, who was just a rookie last year, but a standout rookie for me in my eyes here. What is the expectation around this attack? Because it is a lot of new faces mixed in with, you know, some familiar ones throughout the organization.
Yeah, I think we're going to score a lot of goals, which will be exciting. Now, I do think it might take a little bit of time because these pieces have been added at different times, and you know, it kind of remains to be seen how much of the same wavelength they're going to be on right away. You know, there might not be a 5-goal thriller in Houston or anything like that, but we hope. We never know. But yeah, like Petar Musa scored 16 goals last season off of less than 10 expected goals that he had. So he's an elite finisher. He'll score more often than not when he's given a chance. And now I think he's got a lot more chance creators behind him. Lucho Acosta, obviously. Bernard Kamungo, I think he had a down year last year, kind of a sophomore slump after his breakout in 23. He was also asked to play a little bit of a different position. He was playing wing back, then more of an attacking mid rather than winger. And I see him as almost a second forward. I think that's his best spot when he's playing on the shoulder of the last defender and just timing runs. He's elite at timing runs in behind. And so if he's doing that, and then Lucho Acosta is finding him space, and then he's going to find Moose in the box, that's a pretty good combo. And then there's obviously Anderson Julio, who you mentioned, and he's probably been the standout of preseason in terms of the attack. I think he's got 3 goals, I believe. And he's a guy that I like because he shoots from anywhere and oftentimes on target. And it's been a while since Dallas had a guy like that. I think we were guilty of overplaying a little bit in the past. And that's oftentimes the kind of the coach's instruction was like both were managers who like to have a lot of the ball and like to create really high expected goal chances, essentially. But now Eric's kind of just pedal to the metal, go for goal, and I think that fits Anderson Julio's profile for sure.
A name that I want to ask you about in the attack that I don't know if maybe anyone's asking about right now, but it is Pedrinho, right? The winger that just got the call up from North Texas SC. He's such an interesting profile to me because he's still a relatively young player. He's 20, 21 years old. He came from the Flamengo system down in Brazil. He came through North Texas now and was a standout last year in MLS Next Pro. What is the expectations for him for the first team? Is it more of an MLS Next Pro player this year? Is it more he's going to get minutes for the MLS side? What are, I guess, internally things looking like?
Yeah, so he's been super involved in the first team. He's got actually a few starts with like the starters, even though they weren't all here at the same time in preseason. But he's definitely going to be a full-time MLS player, and I think we will see him subbing late into games early on. But I can definitely see him working into a starting role because Eric Quill's mentioned him in the same vein as Lucho Acosta and Bernard Kamungo and Anderson Julio, who are the presumed starters in that front 3 behind Petar Musa. So I think he'll definitely get plenty of minutes, and he's looked really good at every chance he's had at the MLS level, or at least with FC Dallas. We've only played 2 MLS teams so far in preseason, but he looks really comfortable on the ball in those spots. He doesn't have a ton of pace, so he's probably not going to stretch back lines very often, but he's just super crafty in and around the box. I think he's the kind of guy who, if he is paired with Lucho Acosta, if he's playing wide, I think those two are going to have some awesome 1-2 combination play. And then one of them probably going to find Moose in the box. So I can definitely see him kind of having a breakout year. On our FC Dallas podcast yesterday, we all 3 hosts, including myself, picked him as the young player who's going to break out because he's just looked excellent in preseason and he was awesome last year for North Texas as well.
I mean, his profile, I think, screams he's going to break out. His production on the field, at the U.S. third division level is unbelievable. I think it only makes sense to bring him up to this jump. And I mean, FC Dallas does this. FC Dallas brings up guys and rewards guys who are successful. And we saw that with 6, 5, 6, 7, whatever it was. Signings this offseason. So I like that a lot. Do you think Eric Quill is going to lean more into that youth and the homegrown signings that we saw?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was part of what I would imagine his pitch was to Clark and Dan Hunt, our ownership group, is that, he knows the youth development system and how that's such a big part of the ethos of the club. And that's, they've helped us be successful in years past, got away from it a little bit in the last 3 or 4 years. Part of that's the personnel. If you don't have a super talented young player coming up, the coach isn't going to just throw in young guys just because. But yeah, we kind of have a new crop of really high level young guys coming in, and Eric knows them really well and knows the coaches that help develop them. I think that's a really important thing is he trusts inherently the opinion of the, U17 coaches and the North Texas coaches who help get these guys to where they are now. So I think we'll definitely see a lot more homegrown minutes and Pedrinho minutes, especially because I will say Pedrinho is really the first player to come from overseas to sign with North Texas to then go to the first team level. That's kind of been one of the few failings of North Texas, that we've had a lot of players sign from oftentimes Brazil, Portugal, Argentina, who come in, look good, but then maybe don't get the call up to the first team because of the international spot or whatever it may be. So he's kind of like the first case to have done that. And so it'd be really cool if we see, him kind of be the trailblazer in terms that, look, North Texas can also go find international guys and then bring them up to the MLS level and have them be productive.
I mean, look, the FC Dallas organization as a whole is known to set some trails or blaze some trails. Probably the better wording there.
Certainly on the U side, yeah.
Yes, I mean Jesus Ferreira, right? The first homegrown to get the young DP deal, and obviously he's moved on from the club along with Paul Arriola. You've been around for, both Paul and Jesus, their growth and their time with the organization. What is something that is going to be lacking from the organization with two guys who have been around, who've been leaders of probably the locker room, Major League Soccer in general, and two standout talents?
Yeah, I mean, on the field, missing Jesus Ferreira is going to be interesting because he was, a locked-in starter since 2019 when Lucho Gonzalez really promoted him and made him like the starting striker.
Yeah.
He was essentially like the centerpiece or at least one of the three most influential players on the field for 6 seasons or 5 seasons or whatever it was. So, filling that void is going to be interesting. I'm sure having Lucho Acosta is going to help with that in terms of the creativity. Having Petar Musa is going to help in terms of the goal scoring output that he brought as well. And then on the other side of it, in terms of the personality, Paul Arriola was a huge personality in the locker room. He was the club captain, but also the most experienced MLS player in there oftentimes, and a guy who had played for the national team. He knew all the coaching staff really, really well. He was a huge bridge between the coaching staff and the rest of the locker room, as captains are supposed to be. But he did that in a really professional way. And he was also like the first guy to step up to the mic when the media is asking after a loss. He was the guy who'd be like, I'll do it, guys. And then he'd give really, really thoughtful answers. So between those two guys, we're definitely missing a lot of on the field production and off the field presence. So we'll have to see who's going to step up, especially off the field. I think the pieces are in place to fill their voids on the field, but off the field, I think that kind of remains to be seen, because even if you get really experienced guys coming in, they're still new to the organization. They don't know who we are. They don't know who our local media is, and they don't know each other that well. So I think that's one of those things that's going to come in time.
I hate to not stick with the negative, but stick with the players out. And I started off this interview by saying, right, like I have my questions, not necessarily in a bad way, but there are questions around.
Oh yeah, we all do.
But Alan Velasco, another player on the out, obviously big transfer fee. I think everyone understands why you make the transfer. And Kosti Tafari, another guy who's been within the organization for years and is gone. It has to be such and even like a Jimmy Maurer, right? Like I know it's not a guy maybe on the field every single week, but such a locker room presence. It has to be such a unique, different offseason for you and what you're seeing around the organization of like maybe faces who have been here for the last half decade just aren't around anymore. Like does it I don't know, make it a little weird around, I guess. I don't know the right word to describe.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not weird, but just new. And I think new is probably good, just because it did kind of feel like the end of the cycle after. I do think that Nico Estevez, his play style was quite similar to Lucho Gonzalez, who we had since 2019 as the head coach.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of similar pieces used in there in terms of the player personnel. So when he left and Peter Luxin, who was the assistant coach that entire time, also left, that did kind of feel like the true end of like a 6-year cycle there. So it kind of makes sense. And we're all kind of appreciative to have new stories to tell as well. And the good thing is, Eric, even though we don't have a lot of those consistent faces, the new coach coming in is a kind of a consistent face in a weird way, because he was here for 3 or 4 years prior to that. So there's been a lot of change, obviously, but it's not all completely new either. It's been kind of a good happy medium of, a lot of new faces, a lot of new talent. This is exciting, but also like we also know the coaching staff quite well, because Eric Quill, obviously, but also Michel Garbini, who was an FC Dallas player and then was on Eric Quill's staff at North Texas, stayed with the club the whole time, coached North Texas to the championship last year. Now he's on the first team. So there is some continuity in the really crucial spots there. So it's been a kind of a nice to have a bit of both sides of that.
When this is going to be kind of a sidetrack, but not really. When Robin Fraser got hired up in Toronto, I said, I think it's a great hire because he's bringing in a club ethos and he knows how this club won when it was its most successful in recent time. I almost feel that same exact way with Eric Quill of he's bringing back what he knew was the most successful, whether it's at the North Texas level, the Dallas level, whatever, the most successful time with Dallas in recent history, right?
Yeah.
Or arguably the most successful time in recent history. But I think it all is coming together very nicely. And with that, maybe some returning faces is a Shaq Moore, who I feel like with all the news of the players out and Lucho Acosta in, I feel people forgot that Shaq Moore went to FC Dallas. And he is an FC Dallas Academy kid. obviously I don't think you were there during his academy days, but what's it been like to have someone, again, from the area, from the academy back home? Everyone who I talk to knows Shaq Moore, who has spoken to Shaq Moore, has unbelievable things to say about him. He's such a good personality, good character, and I'm sure that's great to have on, back into the organization.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And I've spoken to him a few times, and yeah, he just seems like a really great, chill dude. And you mentioned he's part of the academy. That's kind of a really like strange one. So he was I think it was 2014. Basically, he moved to Dallas for like 6 months to train with the academy, to be like the highest level of youth development, especially at that time in the country, before he moved to Europe. I think his plan was always to move to Europe to try to get his pro career started there. And I think he was, with Lucho Gonzalez, who was the academy director at the time, kind of treating it as like a finishing school prior to going over to the trials in Europe. So he's not like the tried and true academy Paxton Palma call Jesus Ferreira type, but he does know the organization to an extent. So that's been really cool. And obviously he brings like a ton of experience, like the European side, the MLS side, and the national team. So if you got that trifecta, that's very helpful for a player to come in and then, start producing right away, which I think he'll do. And he seems really comfortable and really cool with the guys, because he's just a very affable guy and just a good personality to have in the locker room.
One of my final questions here is maybe going to be a little bit more into your realm of content around the team and the story of the players. But what do you make of the recent surge of Indonesian fans into the FC Dallas social media world? Obviously, Maarten Paes going and deciding to represent Indonesia at the national team level last year. Unbelievable story. Like, this one got me. I was fully invested. I'm on FOTMob trying to see did Maarten Paes, how many saves did he have for Indonesia? Like, what is that? That's again, you're talking Bernard Kamungo and his very unique story. This is a very unique story.
Yeah, this one is crazy. This one almost kind of came out of the blue a little bit. It was like early in the season last year, and Maarten started mentioning to us like he was going through like the FIFA process of changing nationalities, which isn't always easy, especially at the older age. I think he was like 24, 25 doing it. Usually you do it when you're a little younger. But so essentially his grandmother was born in Indonesia for sure. Back then, I'm trying to remember the name. I think it was a Dutch East Indies back then, because it was a Dutch colony, basically.
Okay.
This was like back in the 30s or something. And so that's how he's eligible, basically. But he got the one-time switch done. And then basically right away, we got thousands upon thousands of Indonesian fans flooding our comments on every platform, and just saying Bang Paes, which means like brother Paes. And it's just like the term they use. And so like, anytime we post anything, at least 50% of our comments are in Indonesian. We're hitting translate to figure out what they're saying. But connecting with them has been super interesting process, because a completely different culture, of course, other side of the world, completely different language. And so we're like, how can we interact with them? How do we give them the Maarten Paes content that they're craving? Because obviously it's great for our numbers and everything. Makes us look good. And so we got very lucky. A student at University of Columbia, or Columbia University, whatever, who's from Indonesia. His name is Ilham. He reached out to me on Twitter, and he's like doing was doing a sports management degree. He since has gotten it. And so we worked with him like almost daily, certainly weekly, just to get to know that culture and work with him in terms of what Indonesian memes we should be using, and what is their what in terms of content, what do they want to see? How do they interact with this stuff? What platform should we be targeting the most? And so I think the pinnacle of that was was getting Maarten to the MLS All-Star game last year, because we were not having a good season, and especially not defensively. Not Martin's fault, but we were conceding a lot of goals. So typically keepers who are conceding a lot of goals don't make it to the All-Star game, but we were able to harness Indonesia, the fourth largest population in the world, and we got them to really buy in and help him win the voting, and got him to the game. And we got Ilham, who helped us get him there. We got him to the game. We got pictures with him together. So that was just a really special experience, and just an incredible like learning experience on the job. Just being like, okay, we have this new incredible opportunity. Let's figure out how we can do this. And so we got an inside man to help us figure it out. And it's been a really cool thing to watch. And Martin's been performing for them and internationally, like playing super well, saving penalties on his debut, I think. So that's just been a really special thing to watch.
when I don't know, obviously, the timeline of it all. So this is maybe a question that doesn't really have a great answer. But when he returns from international duty, I'm assuming it's a pretty long flight. Do you see like a little bit of an exhausted Maarten Paes come into the room?
So it is like a 20-hour flight. It basically takes you like a full day to get there. And there's multiple stops, obviously. But so Maarten's also like a scientist when it comes to sleep and just like body performance and, maximizing everything. So he's got a whole like sleep routine on the plane. And, he's not taking like domestic, cramped knees flights to Indonesia, right? But he's laying down, he's taking melatonin and something else and eating like a warm meal 30 minutes prior to all this. He's got it down to a science. He has a whole sleep coach and everything. So when he gets back, he's usually doing pretty good. So obviously he's going to miss games for the international break overlaps. But when he gets back after a day, he's pretty much right back to it because he's really on the ball with all the science behind sleep.
And I guess my final Indonesia question here, because this intrigued me so much last year. Is there an opportunity for maybe Maarten Paes Indonesian, like I guess written in Indonesian? Is Indonesian a language? I guess
I believe it is.
A jersey written in Indonesian for Maarten Paes. I feel like the marketing team would love that.
Yeah, so we definitely did create jerseys that we sent over there to connect with them a little bit. But do you mean like the name in Indonesian or?
I guess it's name in Indonesian.
I mean, hey, I'll text Ilham. We'll get it all translated. Make sure we have it right. I'm not going to rely on Google Translate for this one. But yeah, no, that's totally a possibility. And Maarten's also, he understands the power of media, especially with this new opportunity that he's had in the last 2 years. So he's always down for any kind of cross-pollination in terms of the media side and the marketing side of things.
All right, my final question for you, Garrett, and I appreciate your time so much. What is a storyline? What is something that maybe you see that maybe the average MLS fan out there doesn't see that you feel like fans should be paying attention to FC Dallas-wise in 2025?
That's a good question. Well, I think one that's kind of gone under the radar is that we're currently renovating our stadium. So we have the third, I guess now the second oldest soccer-specific stadium in the country. Galaxy is the only one with an older one, so it's definitely time for it to get a facelift. So it's going to be like a 3-year process, and we're doing it. We're going to be playing in the stadium while we're renovating one side of it. So that's going to look interesting on TV. I'm not sure how that's going to look so much, but I promise it's going to look a lot better come 2027, and we're super excited about that. But in terms of an on the field storyline, man, there's
field if you want. I mean, I love it all. Okay.
On the field, I do think we can see a Petar Musa explosion. I'm going to go with that because last season he did a lot with a little. He got to the All-Star game as well in a team that wasn't scoring a lot of goals. He was basically the singular force pulling the train on that one. But like I said earlier, 16 goals on less than 10 XG. Super impressive. I think he's going to break the FC Dallas single season scoring record, which is only 18, but it's been hit 3 times. Jesus Ferreira, Jason Kreis, and Kenny Cooper. I think he'll break that this year. And I think he hits somewhere between like 20 to 25 goals and wins the Golden Boot. So keep an eye on Petar Musa. I think he's going to be your Golden Boot winner this year.
I love closing out this interview with a Kenny Cooper reference. So I'm going to leave it at
the best guy ever.
Thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it. Good luck to you and to FC Dallas all season long. One of the few MLS stadiums I really need to get to. So I'm going to make it down there, and I'll let you know when I do. But Garrett, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It was a great time.